cars, guns, and money.
Good day, listeners. Welcome to Build Together, Santa Fe Area Northern New Mexico Builders Association Radio Hour. Happy to have you with us. We love to talk about all things construction, the home sweet home building industry, and important show here. How are we building our communities? How are we addressing housing? You can look up the report. 2022 or 3 New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority housing strategy report identified 30,000 units we are behind in New Mexico. We talk about it all the time here, about how the gap in what people can afford and the cost of what's being built, what the sticker prices of housing, very prohibitive. So I'm happy to have on the show today with me the Housing Policy Advisor for the Office of Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. He's a friend of the show. Everybody's going to know who, when I announce his name, Daniel Werwath. Daniel, you are prolific and a very vocal and active person in the Santa Fe and Northern New Mexico community and all over the state, really, for affordable housing, for policy. And you got the football. So I'm gonna be quiet and let you talk. Package of legislation moving through the roundhouse as we speak. The governor's housing initiative, our association has endorsed it. Tell us what we need to know. What do we need to do to get this thing done?
Great. Thanks, Miles. Great to be here again. Appreciate you getting the word out about the sort of unprecedented array of proposals coming forward from the governor in this legislative session. I mean, I think it helps to start with the backstory. For the last 6 or 7 months, I've served on a housing investment council that was created by the governor specifically to come up with recommendations to address housing availability and the cost of housing. And so the suite of proposals that have come out of that that make up the governor's housing and homeless initiative really span the range between helping some of the most vulnerable, unhoused folks through the growing group of folks in our workforce that make too much for traditional affordable housing programs, but still have a long way to go before they can afford an entry-level market rate house. So, you know, I can dive right in. I think the centerpiece of this proposal is over $500 million in investment that the governor has asked for in her executive budget. $40 million for innovative homelessness approach that would really create an intensive approach to dealing with some of the most hardest to serve in the homeless population with intensive services. The idea behind this is we can by creating new methods to serve these folks that aren't being served by the existing frameworks and programs, we can free up the capacity of those existing programs to serve more people. We can alleviate some of the burdens on public safety and health systems and really make some progress, a lot of progress relative to investment. So there's a $40 million ask for that in the executive budget.
I was just driving down Cerrillos, and I saw, a population of people setting up camp for the night on Cerrillos. And I was like, is this the best we can do? Surely we can do better. So you're going to be the nimble approach. I don't want you to miss out the opportunity to talk about the Office of Housing, which is going to kind of shepherd some of these ideas, best practices into action.
Yeah. Let me run through the funding and then we'll sort of focus in on the Office of Housing and why it's really important in that framework. So yeah, the other funding requests, $250 million to go to the Housing Trust Fund at the New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority. Now, this is an existing tool that supports traditional income restricted affordable housing, so project by project affordable housing finance. Then SB 195 is legislation moving through the House that would open up what's called the Opportunity Enterprise Revolving Loan Fund, which is a relatively new. What's that?
Yeah, House Bill 195,
Oh
I
yeah,
believe.
House
Yeah.
Bill 195, that would open up the Opportunity Enterprise Revolving Loan Fund to fund workforce housing. And so that's another $250 million request, one-time shots of money that we hope would provide enough money to really as many people that want to get involved with solving these housing problems would have capital to support it. The revolving loan fund is focused specifically on workforce housing, so folks that don't qualify currently for existing affordable housing programs because of their income. And it's that's managed by the the New Mexico Finance Authority. They have very similar names. But really the idea there is providing access to infrastructure funds for local government or infrastructure and construction funds to market rate developers that we can hope tease into that entry-level housing segment and use creative financing to help lower the cost of those homes.
So yeah, I think that's really the piece that has our industry folks kind of excited. You know, when we go out, one of our developers who builds a housing project, I think the gap in what is affordable for, like you said, the workforce housing, service employees, teachers, your public safety personnel, make too much for traditional affordable housing programs that maybe are more run by the Mortgage Finance Authority, but not enough to cut the gap. I know that our national just put out a recent report, 85% of New Mexico families, New Mexico households unable to afford a median new home construction. So that's the gap we're trying to fill here. Important to point out, you're responding to something different that we really haven't tried to respond to before, right?
That's absolutely the case. I think part of really I would call this a revolutionary proposal from the governor's office is recognizing that we need to work on the big picture of housing and that our traditional approaches of project by project subsidy aren't enough to address the massive growth in affordability issues over the last few years. And so that's really where the Office of Housing comes in. That's Senate Bill 71.
Go ahead, take a drink of water. Folks, you can get over to buildnewmexico.com, head over to our Builders Journal section. We've uploaded all of the Housing Investment Council working documents. You can read about it and even giving you some shorter talking points and the targets of what folks you can contact in the legislature, House Appropriations, Senate Finance, and really make the case. You know, we need to stimulate production, and this new fund, unprecedented in New Mexico, at an unprecedented level of funding and an unprecedented tool we've never had before, can be supported. So, yeah, what else do people need to know, Daniel?
I think the big picture is that the Office of Housing is something that is a huge priority from the governor's office. Its charge is to look at the big picture of housing, to create a strategic plan for addressing both the cost and availability of housing, to really start working in dimensions of the housing development infrastructure and landscape that we're not working on right now, and starting to create coordination within state government to assess the array of different resources, programs, pots of money, look at where the gaps are, look at how they can be more aligned, streamline access to those resources, while also being able to collect and track data around goals and outcomes so that we can inform policymakers and local governments and investment strategies around housing. I think the other big thing that looking at the regulatory environments, I think one of the things we're hearing a lot about is just from, especially in the Housing Investment Council work, right, is the challenge of finding land that's suitable for, that's zoned in ways that can support entry-level housing. The time it takes from when you find a piece of land until you get a permit, those types of things. So really looking at this office to tackle that from both best practices point of view for local governments, but also technical assistance to local governments. to help them implement better policies around that. So really, everything up to and including things like helping to grow the workforce for the people that create the housing in New Mexico, whether it's construction industries or trades or developers, helping turn small builders into production builders, really looking at this whole big picture to start working on all these other dimensions that aren't currently being worked on, and with the benefit that that helps everybody, right? That helps the entry-level market rate housing. It helps the nonprofit developer who's building traditional affordable housing. I think one of the challenges we see is it's taking more and more subsidy funds to create the same amount of housing. And if we don't start working on that big picture, we're going to start seeing diminishing returns for the investments that we have in affordable housing.
All right, Daniel Werwath, the Housing Policy Advisor for the Office of Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. I'd like to spend 10 more minutes with you, Daniel, if you have it. I know things are fast and furious at the Roundhouse, but let's talk about some real life scenarios, some that you might really know about on the other side of the break. Maybe sort of describe in greater detail that the New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority and some of those traditional affording housing programs, a much different animal than what this Opportunity Enterprise Revolving Fund aims to accomplish, and how the cities and towns and municipalities will also be able to access some infrastructure money. We know that comes with a price tag that ends up on the sticker price of a house, whether you're renting or leasing or owning. Stay with us. Our association executive committee recently endorsed and chose to support, and they said, Miles, go support this thing, the governor's initiative on housing and homelessness. It's a body of work that has kind of come out of 6 or 7 months of work from the governor's Housing Investment Council. I'm joined here by Daniel Werwath. He is the Housing Policy Advisor at the Office of Governor. And Daniel, so grateful to have you on the show. People know your name. You've been involved in numerous organizations, Tierra Contenta, the Housing Trust, the New Mexico Interfaith Housing. You have the bona fide credentials that you've actually deployed housing for our community. And now you're in a position to kind of be the glue between the development community, the private sector, the nonprofit, the governmental bodies. 85% of New Mexico families are not able to afford or qualify for a mortgage for a median new home construction. This governor's initiative, this suite of legislation, if you will, aims to tackle that problem. Take us through some of the nuances of what what's aimed to accomplish, and give us the call to action. How can people in Santa Fe, northern New Mexico, who are like, housing, it's an issue, what should we be doing?
Yeah. That's great. So I think a great way to think about this is really the governor's approach to housing affordability is that it's 30% or less of your income, right? And it's not about how much income you make, but that everyone should have access to housing that's affordable, right? And that's why the suite of investment goes from, homeless assistance through entry-level market rate housing, really looking at that whole spectrum, and then organizing it into a framework through the Office of Housing that really deploys a strategic approach. I think a great example to think about, just coming from the development world, I was talking to some landowners in Santa Fe the other day. They own a piece of land in Los Solares. They've got to build a $5-6 million bridge to access over 50 acres of land that could be turned into workforce housing or mixed use development. Zoned great, has plenty of zoning density to be able to create lots of housing. But when they go out to get financing, banks aren't really interested in lending on a bridge that is going to take 2 or 3 years to start to be paid back from housing development activities down the road.
What if it's a toll bridge? What if it's a toll bridge that Miles stands out there and says, you must pay $1 to get to Tierra Contenta?
Yeah, you may have a better read of Santa Feans than me, but I have a feeling you might end up with a little pushback to that idea. But ultimately, things like the Opportunity Enterprise Revolving Loan Fund could offer financing for something like that bridge in exchange for some commitments to provide entry-level housing, right?
But
And
the municipalities can apply to that, the
the
developers can apply
municipalities
to
or
that?
the developer could both, right? And so that's the idea there. I think the strategy is bringing as many partners to the table with as many tools, financing and otherwise, to try and solve this problem. Because the number one problem, as you said in the lead in, 30,000 units at least that we need. 30 years of underproduction of housing we have to make up for, and quick, if we're going to put the brakes on the runaway housing cost increases we've seen in the last few years. So I think ultimately this is about a massive investment, sort of a moonshot investment, to say we want to have enough funding here for traditional affordable housing, for homeless services, and for entry-level market rate housing as folks can soak up in the next couple of years. Let's not have funding be the constraint. Let's bring new partners to the table. And then as the Office of Housing, start aligning all those resources and working to remove impediments, to create structural fixes that help bring down the cost to create this housing and create an environment where we have as much housing as possible, all under the framework of the Office of Housing, who's setting goals, tracking them, and then helping inform decisions based on data, and really just measuring outcomes based on roofs over heads, which is where the progress is counted.
Yeah, we really don't measure. We haven't set a goal in a lot of municipalities. So, folks, you're listening to Daniel Werwath. He's the governor's housing policy advisor, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. He's got a suite of legislation that you can come support right now. So, we're talking about, you like the sound of this? You like, folks, Daniel Werwath, you want him in the room? Senate Bill 71, correct? Let's call it.
Correct. Yeah. And for folks that aren't familiar, you can, your email blasts have had great information. So for members, look at what Miles is sending out. But you can go to the New Mexico legislature website. You can look up bills. You can track where they're headed. You could look at the legislation. Again, the key bills are SB 71, Senate Bill 71, introduced by Senator Padilla, creating the Office of Housing. HB 195 updates the Opportunity Enterprise Revolving Loan Fund. There's actually a third one doesn't have a bill number yet, but that's a proposal to open up the public project revolving fund to nonprofit developers. So again, creating another funding pool accessible by folks trying to work on the housing stuff. Now, on the funding side, what folks, obviously for the Office of Housing, call your senator, call your representative, and let them know that this is a priority. This is an important thing that we start working in these new dimensions of housing. You can track the committee assignments and where this goes. Its first stop is Senate Health and what is it?
So the Health and Human Services?
Senate Health and Public.
Important thing is
but that's good. It's going to happen before you air. So as we're pre-recording, so that's less important than Senate Finance, which will be its second stop. Looking at those, looking at the members of Senate Finance, look at if you can, showing up, email them, join the Zoom meeting, give public comment. All the support matters, but really contacting legislators, expressing the importance of the suite of legislation here and that it's a package deal. The other big one I think that folks can do, the executive budget request from the governor is something that's negotiated as part of the budgetary process. So really contacting folks on the House Finance and Appropriations Committee, the Senate Appropriations Committee, and just saying that funding housing, setting aside money in all these different pools is really important. That we need to really fund across the spectrum of housing if we're going to get results that really start to mean something for working New Mexicans.
So yeah, so folks, head over to the legislature's website, nmlegis.gov. buildnewmexico.com. Check our builder's journal. We have a lot of tools there for you to understand what we're trying to do here, but it's not rocket science. You're talking about crime, you're talking about education, you're talking about nutrition, you're talking about all of these ailments of our communities. It all starts with a safe, quality roof over your head. And so, trying to do something really, as you said, Daniel, this is revolutionary on housing. And so, again, 85% of New Mexico households unable to qualify or afford a median priced new home. And there's a lot to unpack here: construction costs, labor costs, land costs, the regulatory burdens, but really the gap financing. I think it's great that you mentioned that we need to build a bridge in Santa Fe to unlock a huge parcel of land where we can build, housing for working people. We're talking teachers, service employees, paramedics, EMTs, police officers, all the above. And so, any comments you want to leave listeners with, Daniel? I thank you for serving our state, for having the bravery and the to get up there in that roundhouse and start to be the glue to tie the legislators and the private industry and the nonprofit all together.
I mean, I think you hit the biggest important thing there, that, the solutions here really require everyone working together. And that's really the perspective from the governor and her initiatives, is that we need to put the tools in play as the state to enable this, to help support all the players that want to solve this problem and create the resources to make it happen. I've worked in housing in New Mexico for 20 years. My dad for another 10 years before that. And in that time, this is by far the most revolutionary thing we've seen coming forward in terms of really a suite of proposals, regulatory and funding, to really change the environment around housing. And I hope that we take this opportunity. The thing that I always think about is that it's really hard to claw back from increasing affordability problems. So the sooner that we do this, the easier the work. And then, of course, housing affects so many other things, right? It's at the center of so many measures of well-being at the family level. It's an unbelievable economic investment, right? I think, obviously from your perspective in the Home Builders Association, this, but the average home construction at $300,000 can generate $20,000 plus in tax revenue, gross receipts tax, long-term tax through property tax. These are things that help strengthen the overall financial health of both local and state government, while also just doing great things for families, working folks across the board. So it's unlike almost anything that we invest money in the public sector in terms of the return for the community and the well-being of individuals and families.
All right, there you go, folks. You have your marching orders. Get active, make phones ring in the legislature, write letters, write emails, support these initiatives. It's not duplicating anything we're doing right now. What we've been doing the last 20, 30 years, it's great, but we're in a different world right now. We need new tools. So supporting House Bill 195, Senate Bill 71, calling House Appropriations and Finance members and calling Senate Finance members and saying, let's deploy some of that Permian Basin money. It's not going to be pouring out of the ground forever, and we can put it to good use to put our state on the pathway to some healthier outcomes and housing for all. So, thanks, Daniel, for being on the show. Maybe we'll get to have an update from you it's every few hours. I'm sure things will change.
Yeah,
it's
that's
time
the
to get active.
Things. Yeah, but I appreciate your support and coverage of the issues, Miles, and hopefully your members can get active and work on supporting this as we go forward.
All right, I'm going to publish this thing. Thanks, Daniel, for being with us. Everybody out there, get active, build together, take care of it.
I was gambling in Havana. I took a look